Please rise as we present the colors.
Present, huh? Run squad, halt! Right face. Post play.
like to call to the podium Deacon Tim Keating, chaplain for American Legion Post 615, for our invocation.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, on this special day, we pause to remember the men and women of our armed forces who have served our country at home and abroad during these 242 years of our nation's independence. It is a great and sacred trust that brings us together, Lord, on this day set aside for remembering. It is truly a remembrance worth making, a day of tribute to those who gave their lives in defense of all that America stands for. To memorialize the dead is to pay homage not only to the fallen, but also to their spirit of sacrifice, purity, valor, and justice. The loss of these valiant men and women tears at the very fabric of the family and of our nation. Today we pray for all veterans, those in good health, and for those wounded still in hospitals around the world, fighting to regain their health. And we pray also for those held as prisoner of war on foreign soil, and for those still listed as missing in action. Truly, these men and women are America's finest citizens. They've proven it. And so we commend them to you, Father, those who have left us for a priceless heritage which serves as part of the life and freedom that we now enjoy. Father, we pray all this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain. At this time, I'd like to invite our mayor of Tinley Park, the Honorable Jacob C. Vandenberg, to the podium.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
How about a round of applause for the band once again? Big crowd today. I think it has a lot to do with the weather. So thank you, Lord, for that. It's about time. Before I continue with the welcoming, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our village board. I think we are all here this morning. So in the front we have Trustee Bill Brady, Trustee Cindy Bird. Go ahead and stand if you could. In the back, I think we have Trustee Mike Lotz, Trustee Diane Glante, Trustee Mike Mueller, Trustee Bill Brennan, and is clerk here, and Clerk Kristen Therian. So a round of applause for them. Thank you for being here. You know, this morning I woke up and I took a look at the brochure and noticed that I'm just a welcoming speech, so I'll keep that in mind. I'm not going to give our guest speaking speech, and I'll keep it short. But when we say welcome Tinley Park, I'd like to say that we're a community that we're the best community to raise your family. I think we all know that. But we also are a community that believes in the very fiber of duty, service, and sacrifice. And I'm just going to touch upon those briefly. Duty, first of all, if you look around, we have some of the best veterans in the entire state of Illinois. And I think that's attributed to the fact that they're all here, present, but also that we have a strong VFW, American Legion Post. These service instituted facilities are there to present and give opportunity to veterans that are coming home from war or that are just in need of assistance. So a round of applause for all of our VFW, American Legion Post. Second fiber is service. Obviously the service to the country by our veterans, but also the commission that's putting on this ceremony today, our Veterans Commission. Tinley Park is a odd community when it comes to government. We are a government that's run by our commissions, volunteers, people, residents, business owners, people that want to be a part of our community. And that is extremely important to develop the best community to raise your family, the best community to watch a concert, best community to raise your kids, the best community to play music. So it's that fiber of service that we really love to see, and it's very evident here today. And I'd just like to close with the sacrifice portion. Sacrifice of men and women who lay their lives on the line for us. I wouldn't be standing here as a mayor if it wasn't for that. Tinley Park's very fortunate. We have two Gold Star families. We have Kevin Clark family and Michael Sutter. We also have Aaron Toppin's family in Mokina. And then a family member of mine, Jonathan, excuse me. To the Vanderbilt family and the Jonathan family, thank you. that sacrifice is the absolute fiber that keeps this community together. I'd like to stand here and tell you that Tinley Park's the best community when it comes to supporting its veterans, supporting the families. But really, we're just a small part of that. We're standing here today as Tinley Park residents, whereas across the entire state and across the entire country, municipalities are doing the exact same thing. And this is the most important thing that we could do. We are one small part in the Memorial Day celebration ceremony. I'd like to say that I look forward to continuing that, and I just really relish in the opportunity to be here with you this evening, this morning, and I'm very honored. So on that note, thank you very much for being here. Enjoy the weather, enjoy your celebration, your barbecues today, but really at the end of the day, keep in mind families that they lost so much. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Vandenberg, Village Clerk Therian, attending trustees, fellow members of the Tinley Park Veterans Commission, Gold Star families, and the villagers of Tinley Park, good morning, and thank you for attending today's ceremony. Tinley Park recognizes Memorial Day as a solemn day of thanks and remembrance of those who, while wearing the uniform of our nation, died in war to defend and preserve our freedoms. Many take for granted the ultimate sacrifice paid by those brave souls. Therefore, we set aside one day during the year to remember. 2019 marks 153rd year that we honor their memory through ceremonies such as this. This morning, members of our service organizations conducted a ceremony at each of our local cemeteries, and we select a gravesite of a veteran, vow to continue to honor their service, and say a prayer followed by the planting of a symbolic flower, a rifle salute, and the playing of taps. And this year on Loyalty Day, we also decorated the gravesites of all those veterans. I made mention to our detail out at the cemeteries that when I was in Iraq in 2003, I learned something very valuable, and it was about standing stones. By raise of hand, does anybody know standing stones? Before the written word, people carved stones, very large ones, and they set them vertically in the ground. Why did they do that? Because they didn't have pens and paper to write things down. So the person who lifted that stone marked a very special occasion in their life. Stonehenge, anybody hear of that? That's a different kind of stone, but it marked an astrological occurrence. And so these standing stones tell a story. The story in a standing stone can be lost if the person doesn't tell that story. And that's why we have museums and libraries like the Pritzker Museum and Library, where veterans can go and they can record their wartime experiences to preserve those memories. But this morning when we visited those grave sites, we saw the gravestones of those who gave their life and made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. So they are a form of standing stone. They mean so much, and to us, they mean more if an American flag is placed by them, because that in and of itself tells a story. And at this time, I would like to invite our guest speaker, who is absolutely from the Pritzker Military Museum and Library. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Mr. Paul Grassmeyer, the reference coordinator, who's our guest speaker today.
Mayor Vandenberg, village trustees, Veterans Commission, Gold Star families, attending veterans, and the band. Thank you for being here today. When I see all the gathered here today and note how you commemorate Memorial Day, I believe Major General John Logan would be very pleased that your community is putting deeds into words that he wrote in his General Order 11 back in 1868 on why we need to commemorate our fallen veterans. Several weeks ago, I was asked by PMML member and volunteer Chris Hansley if I'd be interested in speaking at this Memorial Day ceremony. I quickly accepted. Those who know me can affirm I love to talk history, and as a former Army officer and high school history teacher, I'm always looking for opportunities to teach. I decided my topic would be the fallen Illinois soldiers, airmen, and sailors who were buried or memorialized on the tablets of the missing at American Battle Monuments Commission cemeteries in France and the United Kingdom, specifically those young Illinois soldiers, sailors, and airmen who fell during the momentous events of D-Day, June 6, 1944, which we are approaching the 75th anniversary of. As my intern Caitlin Fry and I researched the names of the dead and the missing, it became apparent their units, their stories were representative of the sweeping arc of events of the D-Day invasion 75 years ago. Tracing the chronological series of events, we find those Illinois men represented at every major event in and around Normandy that day. Thomas Campbell, the Scottish poet, wrote in his 1825 poem, Hallowed Ground. What hallows ground where heroes sleep? It's not the sculptured piles you heap. In dews that heaven far distance weep, their turf may bloom, or genie twine beneath the deep their coral tomb, but strew as ashes to the wind, whose sword or voice has served mankind, as is he dead, whose glorious mind lift thine on high. To live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. The video at Cambridge American Cemetery's Visitor Center eloquently states the purpose of it and all American Battle Monuments Commission cemeteries. Quote, to acknowledge those who fell, to honor their sacrifice, to remember who they were and what they did when the world hung in the balance, end of quote. The ceremony serves, quote, as a reminder of their heroism and their lives. Their legacy is all around us in the freedom we enjoy every day, end of quote. When you visit those ABMC cemeteries in Normandy American Cemetery, Colville-sur-Mer, right behind Omaha Beach, or at Brittany American Cemetery, 75 miles away in St. James, France, or in Cambridge American Cemetery in the UK, you'll find the names of 38 Illinois soldiers, airmen, and sailors who were killed in action during the first 24 hours of the invasion of France. Now, you'll also find 9 Illinois men who don't have a grave there. They're listed on the tablets of the missing and are memorialized at each of those 3 cemeteries. Now, I'm not going to belabor the events of the D-Day invasion. We all know what happened. So I'm just going to remember those Illinois men by looking at an arc of events that happened on D-Day. The first men into Normandy that day were the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne. They dropped in to drop zones in Normandy, and it was a very chaotic drop. There were low clouds, the ground was covered with heavy fog, there was German anti-aircraft fire, and so it was very challenging for those transport pilots to drop the airborne paratroopers on the drop zones. Now, the pilots knew when they flew over the coast of the Cottonton Peninsula, they had 18 minutes from the time they flew over the coast to reach the drop zones. But then they had to quickly drop the paratroopers because 5 minutes after they reached that point, they'd be back over the English Channel, and anyone they dropped at that point would fall into the water. In that first hour of the invasion, from 1:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m., Illinois men, 101st Airborne paratroopers, PFC Raymond T. Hoffman of Chicago, Private Felix J. Lopakin of Zion, Private Warren W. Perkins of Lebanon, Private Michael Moriarty of Chicago, Corporal Donald Shinkoff of Chicago, Staff Sergeant George F. Hurt, and Technician 4th Grade Stanley Stockins of Chicago were killed in action during that first chaotic hour. These men were burdened with 125 to 150 pounds of gear, dropping into often flooded areas near the drop zones. They were hit often by German aircraft fire prior to being able to even exit the aircraft. As an example, those young men that I just mentioned are buried at Normandy American Cemetery. Private Roy Mezzo of Peoria was one of 15 paratroopers from the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, along with 4 aircrew from his aircraft that had been hit by German flak. The pilots are trying to return over the drop zone to drop their paratroopers, and that aircraft fell out of control into the English Channel, and Private Mezzo and the others perished. Private Mezzo doesn't have a grave at Normandy American Cemetery. His name's listed on the tablets of the missing. A number of those pilots are also among the dead and missing. Flight Officer Steve Barron of Harvey. His crew was shot down by German anti-aircraft fire. Flight Officer George Crow of rural Jackson County. He was able to successfully drop his load of paratroopers, but then his aircraft fell out of control into the water. After those initial wave of 101st Airborne paratroopers dropped, the 82nd Airborne came on. Private John Jordan of Chicago, Technician 4th Grade Frank Nikolai of Chicago were killed in action during the initial drop. PFC Joseph Smolik of Chicago was also killed in action. He's not buried at Normandy American Cemetery, but Brittany American Cemetery further south. Second Lieutenant William Donahue, a transport pilot, is listed as missing in action. And it's listed on the tables of missing. Staff Sergeant Roy Geyer of Chicago, radio operator in one of the aircraft, is also listed on the tablets of the missing. After the 82nd Airborne dropped and made their ways to their initial assignments, the next event to happen during the events of that day were the bombing of the German defenses near the beaches. The low cloud cover caused problems with the air crews. One of the planes piloted by, it wasn't piloted, but crewed with Captain Everett Guimond of Bantino, was flying his 28th mission, Captain Guimond was, too shy of being able to rotate home. And on the outbound leg toward the target, his B-24 experienced engine difficulties and crashed, and his remains are buried at Cambridge American Cemetery. A side note from that crash: in 1996, a farmer in Norfolk accidentally struck with his tractor a 225-pound bomb that had not exploded from Captain Guimond's aircraft. It did not explode in 1996, but it shows how we still have a problem of unexploded ordnance in and around these World War II sites, even the World War I sites. And another Chicagoan, Lieutenant Samuel Shapiro, a transport pilot, was killed in a later glider lift before dawn, bringing in reinforcements. So it was not yet dawn on D-Day, and 18 young Illinois men had already lost their lives in the events of D-Day. The Navy and the Coast Guard were delivering the assault troops to the shores. and here we lost more of our Illinois men. The Seaman First Class Walter R. Siebert of Chicago drowned when his landing craft tank foundered and sank in heavy seas west of Omaha Beach. Lieutenant William Klein was an armor officer from Chicago, and his landing craft tank vessel, LCT 593, carrying a platoon of tanks, struck a mine off Utah Beach in its approach, sank, and Lieutenant Klein is listed in the tablets of the missing. Private Edward Donahoe of Galena was declared missing in action after his LCT 458 struck a mine, and his artillery battery lost 60 men when the ship sank. Private Donahoe is listed as missing in action. Seaman First Class Howard Day of Chicago listed as missing in action when his landing craft large 232 was struck off Utah Beach by German coastal batteries and sunk. Ensign George Edwards of Brimfield aboard LCI-5 was killed by German shell fire, firing from positions near Cherbourg. Ship's cook First Class Wilfred L. Davis of Chicago was struck and killed by German shell fire after his vessel, LCT-25, struck an underwater obstacle off Omaha Beach. The toll on Illinois soldiers and sailors was about to get much worse over the next 4 hours when the soldiers struggled ashore on Omaha and Utah Beach. Preliminary naval and air bombardments had failed to silence German guns along the 5-mile width of Omaha Beach. Smoke obscured the landmark reference points, so the Navy and Coast Guard coxswains would not get the exact landing point correct where units were assigned. The problem with this was the exits off the beach, where vehicles could exit off these beaches quickly, were heavily defended by German resistance nests that had anti-tank guns, machine guns, mortars. If you landed between these defended draws, it was possible that you could make your way off the beach a little easier than if you landed right in front of these defended draws. So many of the casualties from Omaha Beach that day are because they landed right directly in front of these defended areas. When they release Saving Private Ryan in a few days, prior to the 75th anniversary of D-Day, that first 20 minutes, you'll see an action at the west end of Omaha Beach where A Company of 116th Infantry and a Ranger unit come on shore. The event that scene is portraying, there were Illinois men that died there. The 116th Infantry is a Virginia National Guard regiment that its nickname's the Stonewall Brigade. It traces its history back to the American Civil War. But what a lot of people don't know is so many of the men in that unit were filler from Illinois, specifically Chicago. All right. PFC Joseph Wykalunas of Chicago was killed attempting to advance across the beach. He's with that Company A, 116th Infantry. Private Cecil Toller of Charleston was killed in this area. Ranger PFC Eddie Harding and Ranger John M. Irving of Potomac were both listed as missing in action after German shell fire killed half of their Ranger company before it could even reach the beach there. Both men are listed on the Normandy American Cemetery's tablets of the missing. PFC Jerome Wilson, B Company of the 116th, was killed shortly after landing at 7. Second Lieutenant James Limber of Chicago, also of the 116th, and Technician 5th Grade Eugene E. Okari of Cook County died just west of there shortly after 7:10. Technician 5th Grade John B. Allison of Glen Ellen of the 149th Engineers, Captain Thomas Mondres of Chicago, the 81st Chemical Mortar Battalion. All are buried at Normandy American Cemetery. They're all casualties from that first hour, 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. landing on Omaha Beach. Sergeant Steve Tepovich of DeKalb, an MP attached to the 5th Engineers Special Brigade, died in this section of Omaha Beach. PFC John D. Olberg, a ranger with Company D, 2nd Ranger Battalion, died at missing in action at Point de Hoc, and he's still listed on the tablets of the missing at the Normandy American Cemetery. Coast Guard Motor Machinist Mate, 3rd Class, August Bunsick of Arlington Heights was killed when German shells blew apart the pilot house of LCI Large 94. Radio Man 3rd Class Stanley Wolfsick of Chicago was killed aboard Landing Craft Infantry 91 when it struck a German mine after German artillery had set its fuel tanks on fire. First Sergeant Leonard W. Hopkins, West Frankfort, died at about 8 a.m. He was a member of the 58th Armored Field Artillery Battalion. Private Edward S. Donok of Joliet was a member of the 467th Anti-Aircraft Battalion Automatic Weapons. He died about 8:30 on the morning at Omaha Beach. Private James Day, Winnebago County, 507th MP Battalion, died on Omaha Beach. Corporal William D. Franco, Chicago, 37th Engineer Battalion, assigned 5th Engineer Special Brigade, died in England after evacuation off of Omaha Beach. He's buried at Cambridge American Cemetery. Technician 5th grade Robert J. Kruger, Blue Island, 37th Engineers, 5th Engineers Service Brigade, Special Brigade. PFC John Scupion of Chicago, 115th Infantry Regiment of the 29th Infantry Division. Technical Sergeant George Kyle of Chicago was an airman. 394th Bomb Group. His B-26 unit had already flown a mission. They flew 2 different missions to support the troops on the morning of June 6th. Problem is, when you have over 1,000 aircraft in the sky and problematic cloud cover, planes unfortunately collide. Technical Sergeant George Kyle's aircraft was one of those involved in a mid-air collision. He's buried at Cambridge American Cemetery. Second Lieutenant Kenneth Label of Chicago, 493rd Bomb Group, a B-24 crewman. His B-24 was also involved in a mid-air collision and fell into the sea. He's still labeled as missing in action and is noted on the tablets of the missing at Brittany American Cemetery. PFC Frank Geigner of Oaklawn, 298th Engineer Combat Battalion, died on Utah Beach trying to clear mines and attack the German defenses on Utah Beach. Technician 5th grade Stephen Ull of Ottawa, 531st Engineer Shore Regiment, also died on Utah Beach at about 10 a.m. PFC Andrew Kurlovic of Madison, 12th Infantry Regiment. 12th Infantry Regiment, 4th ID, ran into a large minefield working its way off of Utah Beach. Well, the D-Day moves on, and in the afternoon, even though the heaviest fighting was over on Omaha Beach by 11 a.m. on June 6th, Illinois men were still involved in heavy combat throughout the day. Army Air Force Captain Bernard L. McGrattan of Chicago, 335th Fighter Squadron. His P-51 unit was conducting a patrol near Rouen in north-central France. They were strafing a German troop convoy, and unfortunately their flight got bounced by German fighters diving from above. Captain McGrattan was killed in action and is buried at Normandy American Cemetery. The American units, having gained a toehold on the shores of Normandy, then tried to reinforce their units with further glider landings of field artillery units for the 82nd Airborne and the 101st. The 82nd Airborne officers, knowing that they were about to receive these gliders, approached one of the 4th Infantry Division regiments and said, where the gliders are supposed to land, there are still Germans in the area. Can you attack through that area to clear the Germans out of there? And the regimental commander said, "My guys are exhausted after going through waist-deep flooded area for the last several hours and going through a bunch of minefields. We're not going to attack through that area." Sadly, because the Germans were not cleared from near those landing zones, you have 4 other Chicagoans, Illinois residents, that died about 10 p.m. on the evening of June 6th. 10 p.m. it's still light because the British during World War II were using what's called double summertime. So it would not get dark at 9 p.m. It would get dark about 11 p.m. And Private Stanley Bianaz of Chicago from the 319th Glider Field Artillery Battalion, PFC Alphonse Eilerman of Albers from the 325th Glider Infantry Regiment, Sergeant James O. Lamb from Mowequa of the 320th Glider Field Artillery Battalion, and Private John Pruger of Chicago with the 320th Glider Field Artillery Battalion are killed during the heavy fighting around the landing zone about dark on the evening of June 6th. The sun sets, but still there are casualties on that day. Navy pharmacist mate 2nd class Ernest P. Verdon of Chicago was assigned to 2nd Beach Battalion. He was doing what all good pharmacist mate corpsmen do. He was treating that day's wounded at an aid station on Omaha Beach when his aid station was hit by German artillery fire. Thus, pharmacist mate 2nd class Verdon is the last Illinois casualty from D-Day. Now, why did I take the time to what some people may think, oh, that's just a boring list of names? Because remember what Thomas Campbell wrote. To live in the hearts we leave behind is not to die. So, in 2000, President Clinton signed into law a national moment of commemoration and remembrance. Every Memorial Day at 3 p.m., we're to take a moment and reflect on our fallen. And so, what I would like us to do later today, there's always been a polarity, a dichotomy between a somber reflection and commemoration of Memorial Day, and then partying and picnicking and whatnot. When you read the newspaper accounts from the 1860s, there were already people fretting, oh, we're not doing enough to commemorate, we're not taking this seriously enough. Well, I think it's wonderful to have picnics and celebrate and have fun in the midst of our commemoration. And what I've seen a lot over the last several days is veterans saying, do several things. Be aware of our veterans that may be struggling. One of my British friends made mention yesterday, he was attending the Indianapolis 500 and the A-10s flew over prior to the start of the race, and it spooked him back to a memory he had in Afghanistan. So I would ask you 3 things. Be there for our vets that may be having problems. Be aware of their struggles. Secondly, get to know somebody, one of those names that has served our country in uniform and has fallen. That's what we do at Pritzker Military Museum and Library. We help the public learn about all those amazing stories, and I'm constantly humbled when I read through these stories about the amazing things these young men did at age 17, at age 18, at age 19. It just causes one to pause. And then lastly, I love that your community is very cognizant of the Gold Star families in your midst. Be there for our Gold Star families, and As I said at the beginning of the speech, General Logan would be very proud of Tinley Park. Your community is definitely doing it right in the way you go about commemorating and remembering all the veterans who've fallen. So thank you.
Freedom is not free. As he just alluded to, those names mean something. It means something to each and every one of us, because without their efforts, we wouldn't be allowed to have these types of celebrations. We celebrate their lives. And you know, if they were with us today, they'd probably be hoisting one with us. So freedom comes with a great dedication to our nation's principles, as well as great sacrifice. When you recite the Pledge of Allegiance or sing the national anthem, you come close to understanding the heart of a veteran. Throughout history, there have been a number of events that have spurred our nation to war. During our involvements with World War I, we lost 53,402. World War II, 291,557 men and women. Korea claimed 33,686. Vietnam, 47,424. The Gulf War I, 49. And the global war on terror so far, 5,669. Within those numbers are fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, aunts, and uncles. And for all their families, every day is Memorial Day. And now I'd like to invite up one of the youth of our community. I'm very proud to announce that the Voice of Democracy winner is with us today, and it's Colin Standish. Would you please join me on the podium?
Hello. I just want to say real quick that I'm really honored to be here on this day of remembrance. So my essay is titled, Why My Vote Matters. America was built on the foundations of voting. This ideology that people have a say in how the country is run is what makes America the best country on earth. The citizens of the United States were given this right way back in the 18th century because the founders believed that this is what the country stands for. It is a right and responsibility to vote, which makes the United States such a unique and radical new nation. With this right, the government will always be accountable to the people who put it in power. For this accountability to work, and for our nation to remain strong, we must exercise our right to vote, and we must exercise it responsibly. My vote matters because it determines who will run the country, the fate of our country and other countries, and it shows that I stand for what I believe in, like the colonists did for the American Revolution. My vote matters because it determines who will run the country that I live in. The president has the power to change the nation as a whole. I want a president who will fight for this country and what it believes in. One that will listen to the people in times of need. My vote can help decide who will be up to the challenge of running our country productively and correctly. Not only is the president in control of what happens in our country, but he or she is in control of the military, which is what protects us and others from the dangers of war. The job of the presidency is considered one of the most important jobs in the United States, and that is why voting is such a big decision that can determine who will be the best fit for our country to become the best it can be. Young voters account for half of the voting population, which can be a make it or break it deal for who will be the next president. As a young voter, my vote is very important. My vote matters because it determines the fate of our country. After voting for president, whoever is elected is going to run our country and make decisions that will determine the fate of us and the fate of others. My vote is ultimately determining the livelihood of not just me, but all of the citizens of America. The president is who you believe will be right for this country and make it safe for the citizens to live in. If you did not vote and you're upset with how the country is being run, then you should have voted and had a say in how it is. This decision is very important because you have a right to say how you want this country to turn out, like by voting for someone who will make it how you want it to be. For example, if you want low taxes or safer laws, then you could vote for someone who believes in those things. Luckily, America was built on listening to the people, so the government truly believes that your vote's very important for the future of this country. Voting is a right that some citizens of other countries do not have, so we should be thankful for the right to choose how the fate of this country plays out. My vote matters because it shows that I stand for what I believe in, just like the founders of America did for the American Revolution. Voting is essential. America was based on the ideas of freedom and democracy, and while we may not always live up to those ideals, the struggle is to keep moving forward toward perfection. The American colonists fought for their right to make a nation that was its own and governed by the people. This idea is still shown today through voting, in which the people have a right to say how this country is run. Our vote is our voice. We are not truly heard unless we vote. Americans should stand for what they believe in and not change because others tell us what to do. These ideals are exactly what the colonists fought for in the Revolution. To finalize, my vote matters because it determines who will run the country, the fate of our country and other countries, and shows that I stand for what I believe in. Without the right to vote, we are not Americans, we are prisoners. Democracy is the very foundation of our government and our way of life. Voting sets an example for the rest of the world that people should have a say in how their nations are run, and that this philosophy is the key to a great and powerful society. Thank you.
We do it right here in Tinley. He gets it. All right, that's why we fight. We have many traditions here in Tinley, and one is honoring our veterans. And one of those ways has become part of our Memorial Day ceremony, and it's the Battlefield Cross ceremony.
My name is Command Sergeant Major Cagle, and I'm part of the VFW Post 2791 Honor Guard in Tinley Park. Shortly, we will build a battle cross, also known as a battlefield cross, in memory of our servicemen and women who have been killed in action in the past and current wars or conflicts. Without the armed forces of the United States of America, we would not have the freedom we enjoy today, for freedom is never free. The Honor Guard members from the VFW, the American Legion, and the Marine Corps League will now build a monument in front of you. A moment that anyone who has ever served in the military will recognize. Sergeant at Arms. The weapon has been inspected, magazines removed, the last round has been fired. The dog tags. These military identification tags are commonly referred to as dog tags. This set is blank, no name, serial number, or religious preference, because they represent all those who have died in the service to their country. The helmet. The helmet is a valued piece of equipment, more than just for protection. How many of us have shaved in it, bathed in it, and even cooked in it? This helmet will no longer be used. Post. The boots. The boots are worn and without polish. Demonstrates the trails endured These boots, which are threadbare, should never touch the ground again. Sergeant of the Guard, salute the monument. Tom, salute and bring them in. All members of the detail will enter now, each one carrying a folded American flag. As they circle the monument, each stopping at the sandbag, members do not face the memorial. Host.
Postal colors.
A moment of silence, please. Standing fast. As you were. Whenever there's a combat mission, after the combat mission, we do what is called the last roll call. This is a final tribute paid by the soldiers to their fallen comrades. This roll call is the accountability conducted by the first sergeant following combat. Although sometimes painful to listen through, the last roll call is with conviction that every soldier of the unit will be accountable for and none will ever be forgotten. Sergeant Hernandez.
Here, sir.
Speak up. Corporal Ken McCloy.
Yes, sir.
Hoorah. Sergeant John Murphy.
Here, sir.
Private Sal Malazzo.
Here, sir.
Staff Sergeant Sutter. Staff Sergeant Sutter. Staff Sergeant Michael J. Sutter.
Staff Sergeant Michael J. Stutter, United States Army, 745th Ordnance Company, killed in action at Cuba, Iraq, 26 December 2003.
Moment of silence. Corporal Clark. Corporal Clark. Corporal Kevin M. Clark.
Corporal Kevin M. Clark, United States Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment, killed in action in El Abba Province, Iraq, 19 February 2005.
Moment of silence. Detail. Present Hunt. Order Hunt. Sergeant Guard, march the detail out.
Detail, right? Hey! Forward, mark.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have witnessed about 3 of these when I served 32 years in the military. It's a very sad moment whenever you or a comrade do not come back on a combat mission. It makes you think. The people who's gathered around, they take this very seriously because they never know if the next ceremony will be about them. Some will talk about old stories, some will swap pictures, some will tell jokes, but they know that the next ceremony may be of them. Thank you very much.
One of the traditions now is the presentation of the wreath in memory of the fallen veterans. Just as they do at Arlington Cemetery, a wreath is laid at the Tomb of the Unknowns, and here we conduct a similar tribute at the base of our battlefield cross. Members of the VFW and American Legion posts will now place the wreath.
Present heart. Tail, hope, right face. Left face. Other way, sir. Detail. Forward. Hut. Order. Hut.
We'll now be joined by Ken McClory for the singing of My Buddy.
Indelibly tied to the American soldier, Doughboys became the most enduring nickname for General Pershing's expeditionary forces who fought so gallantly on the Western Front in World War I. Just as enduring was an expression coined by those doughboys, drawn on the grief felt over lost comrades. In the military, there is a band of brotherhood that is hard to explain, but deeply embedded in our hearts and souls. Basically, it is about war friends found, friends lost, but mainly a cry of grief for friends who made the ultimate sacrifice. During World War II, General George Patton said it best, and I quote, "It is foolish and wrong to mourn the men who died. Rather, we should thank God that such men lived." End of quote. My Buddy was recorded in 1922. Most notably, celebrities to sing the song, entertaining and inspiring combat troops were Dinah Washington in World War II in Korea, and Nancy Sinatra during the Vietnam War, performing at numerous USO shows overseas. From the Great War through the Cold War, and now during every present war against terror, including our great country's many conflicts defending our freedoms, it is my humbling and privilege to honor, to commit, and to remember America's fallen war heroes on this Memorial Day. As we leave this Memorial Day ceremony today, and as we walk past Old Glory, the flag, and enjoy the rest of the day, may we save a spot in our hearts for those that cannot be with us today. Life is a book that we study. Some of its reads bring a sigh. There it was written, my buddy, that we must part, you and I. Nights are long since you went away. I think about you all through the day. My buddy, my buddy, my buddy, oh so true. Miss your voice, the touch of your hand. I long to know that you'll understand. My buddy, my buddy, your buddy's missing you.
Thank you, Ken. Behind me, behind this tent, there's the Heroes Walk. And every year we have bricks placed in the Heroes Walk, and it's broken up by service. And if you take a walk down our Heroes Walk, you'll see the names of veterans, living and dead. And if you want to commemorate one of your family members who has put on the cloth and the uniform of this nation, you can do so at the Village Hall or by going on our website. This year's bricks include one special brick that's not on my walk. This brick is dedicated to a woman who was on my commission for as long as I was on the commission. And she was full of spit and vinegar. And if you've ever seen Hallmark's Maxine, that was Colleen Simon. She was a member of our Veterans Commission, and Colleen is dearly missed. And it just so happens that we couldn't put her brick on the Heroes Walk because Colleen never served, but Colleen Simon was one of the closest things to a veteran that I've ever seen in my life. She was so dedicated. So we had her brick placed in a more prominent spot in front of one of the benches that's dedicated to the village of Tinley Park. Colleen retired from the Rock Island Railroad, where she worked in real estate acquisition. And after retiring from the railroad, she went to work at School District 146 as an administrative assistant. She was very active throughout Tinley Park's community, and she volunteered in many roles, primarily as a commissioner for the Tinley Park Veterans Commission and the Tinley Park Oktoberfest. Colleen was a friend and a contributor to the Tinley Park Historical Society, and her largest contribution to our community from Tinley Park to Hawaii was opening her home and helping children and young adults, filling in as a mom to many. So our brick is dedicated to Colleen, and after the ceremony, please feel free to go ahead over and look at the plaza just in front of the village bench. Another name that appears for us is another member of my commission, and he's here with us today, William Douglas Doc Rasmussen, and 6 of his family members are in attendance. Please identify by standing. It's hard to tell when Doc stands, but there he is. Thank you, Doc. And Doc's brick reads, honoring Dad, W.D. Rasmussen III, Corpsman 6872. We love you and are forever grateful. Lily, Angel, and Tony. Another brick. In his youth, Doc Rasmussen earned the highest honor as Eagle Scout. And he's provided health care for over 43 years, and he served as a hospital corpsman for 4 years in the Navy. He completed clinical lab assistant training at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, Portsmouth, Virginia, and was the head of the dispensary laboratory at Naval Air Station at Corpus Christi, Texas, and at Camp Smedley Butler for the 3rd Marine Division in Okinawa. He also served as Search Air Rescue Medic Flight crew member in helicopter operations in the Naval Air Station. If you want to learn more about Doc, just go up and ask him. He's perfectly willing to share stories. Remember, we need to share stories, right? Please feel free to check out Doc's brick after the ceremony. He was recently honored by his chiropractic society for being a proponent of Veterans Affairs as well. And we're so proud of Doc. And he runs our Art in Public Buildings program in the Veterans Commission. Next brick is Jason R. Brown. Is the family here? There we go. And The inscription reads Jason R. Brown, and attending Norman Brown and 3 other family members, and the brick reads Jason R. Brown, Honor Guard, U.S. Coast Guard. Jason Brown, his rank in the Coast Guard was Seaman, and he was a member of the Elite Center 4 drill team while assigned to the Honor Guard. Thank you very much. Anthony Serwian. Attending is Sharon and Nick Yasillo. And the brick reads, Anthony Sherwin, Baton Death March, 9 April 1944. Anthony Sherwin, U.S. Army, Chicago, Illinois. This bio is something to hear. My brother Ray Lentz, who lives in Minnesota, and I, Sharon Yasillo, have been doing ancestor research for a couple of years ago. We came across a book, POW, Tears That Never Dry. It turns out that the author, PFC, Anthony Serwin, is the brother of our Uncle Frank Serwin. Anthony was in the Army at the start of hostilities when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and bases in the Philippines where he was stationed. When the Philippines surrendered early in the war, U.S. and Filipino troops were forced to march in what was known as the Bataan Death March. Thousands of men were tortured and killed in this brutal march to the Japanese prison camps. This lesser-known part of World War II has been largely forgotten. POW, Tears That Never Dry, is Anthony's account of his 3.5 years as a prisoner of war, starting with the Bataan Death March that ended up in a Japanese prison camp. A nurse at Hines Veterans Hospital encouraged and helped Anthony write the book. Sadly, Anthony passed away in 2004 at the age of 87, and our Uncle Frank passed away in 2011. So we never had the opportunity to meet Anthony and missed our chance of talking to Uncle Frank about his brother. This brick is our way of honoring Anthony and all the World War II prisoners of war. The Tinley Park Library will also be given a copy of POW, Tears That Never Dry. Thank you, family. And last but not least, James Rago from the Navy. Attending is Mark Rago, +1, Navy 2. Rago family? There we go. And their brick reads, James Rago, Navy, World War II, 1942 to 1946. Korea, 1951 to 1952. James P. Rago enlisted in the U.S. Navy at the age of 19 years old on December 15th, 1942. James earned the rank of Machinist Mate First Class. He was assigned to the USS Barnes, ACV-20. From March 30th, 1943 to December 27th, 1944, James was in the Battle of Tarawa, November 10th, 1943 to November 30th, 1943, and the Mariana Islands, Philippines, Peleliu Island, Palau, August 30th, 1944 to November 23rd, 1944. Then James was transferred to the USS Bellet, APD 109, from June 15th, 1945 to February 15th, 1946. During this time, James was also part of the Japanese occupation from October 13th, 1945 to December 25th, 1945. James was honorably discharged on February 23rd, 1946. Then came along the Korean War. James was called up for duty from the Naval Reserve, and James was assigned to the USS Roe, DD-564, from August 15th, 1951 to November 20th, 1952. James was honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy on October 25th, 1954. You want to talk about service and honor and duty before country and service before self. Those bricks behind me represent each and every one of those terms. Across this great land, the nation's flag flies at half-staff, reminding all of us for those who paid the ultimate sacrifice that we might remain free. However, it is raised to full staff at noon, indicating that our nation remains strong and resolute in continuing to be an example to the world. Our Honor Guard and Rifle Squad are comprised of members of Tinley Park service organizations. Please rise as they perform a flag ceremony, rifle salute, and please remain standing as taps is played.
Raise it. Halt.
I could ask our Deacon Tim Keating, chaplain for the American Legion Post 615, if he please read us the benediction.
Please bow your head now as we pray with gratitude and in remembrance. Father, as we remember this day those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, we are filled with gratitude and pride. We thank you for those men and women who have laid down their lives in loving, selfless sacrifice for us, for our nation, for our freedom, for our families, for our children. They are an image, a reflection, and an extension of your love, grace, mercy, and compassion for all people. A life given in love is never given in vain. Help us to honor their sacrifice by cherishing the freedoms they died to preserve. Help all citizens of this great nation to sacrifice themselves in humble service to their neighbors, recognizing that all we have come from your gracious hand and that we are but stewards and managers of your boundless providence. Grant our nation humble and faithful leaders who bear the sword that you give them for the good of those under their charge, and make this nation under God a beacon of light, of charity, of mercy, of hope, and of peace for the world, that those who do not enjoy freedom as we do may know true peace in the light of your love, your mercy, and your forgiveness. Hold our servicemen and women in your loving care. Cover them with your sheltering grace and presence as they stand in the gap for our protection. We also remember the families of our troops and ask your unique blessings to fill their homes, and may your peace, provision, and strength fill their lives. May the members of our armed forces be filled with courage to face each day, and may they trust in the Lord's mighty power to accomplish each task. Let our military brothers and sisters feel our love and support. May the peace of God that passes all understanding, the peace which the world can neither give nor take away, abide us with this to bless this day and even forevermore. Father, we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I have one more quick presentation to make. And could I ask the Sutters to join me on stage? You know, I've been the chairman of the Veterans Commission for a bit, and I was going through some of our stuff, and there's lots of it, as my wife will attest to. But as I was going through it, I ended up finding a few items that need to be presented. And this one is a certificate of purchase, the Village of Tinley Park, the brick paver program, Veterans Walkway. Your 4x8 brick will read as follows: Staff Sergeant Michael Sutter, U.S. Army, KIA, Iraq, 12/26/2003. And I'd like to present this to the Sutters. This concludes our ceremony, but I want to thank the band. Give it up for the Andrew High School Band. Don't ever forget, walk that hero's walk, learn a name, and hoist one for them.